Oh, it has been too long, such a long time since I've done this, but I'm so happy to be back. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Lilliard, and welcome to round 2 at the Ricard circuit in France for season 15 here in One Hub Racing in the Pinnacle tier. Just 3 tiers running this season. Last season I was the Prestige tier commentator. It's been a long time since I've done this. The Prestige tier, as you know, in season 14 was ended after Japan for various reasons. I don't need to get into it. It's already been discussed and overplayed, so we'd leave it alone. I was supposed to do the qualifying night but felt unwell, and I was supposed to obviously do last week at Bahrain, but due to the world currently having a bit of an issue globally, I've had to pick up extra shifts and I was unavailable. So thank you very much to the 2 guys that jumped in to cover me last week. I did start the stream a couple of minutes late. I was having some technical issues, but I'm here now. We've got almost a full grid. We're missing 1 driver, looks like one of the Alfa Romeo drivers, but everyone else is pretty much here, present and correct, and have been in the lobby for the best part of 10 minutes. 20 seconds away then from going to the circuit. 27 laps, I think it is. It should be. I was racing about an hour ago in the podium tier. I'm pretty sure it's 27 laps that these drivers will be tackling tonight at this very unique circuit. Unique in the way that it has 0% grass and gravel. The runoff areas are completely tarmacked with that blue and red abrasive surface to slow the cars down. So we're off to the circuit now. Hopefully nice sunny skies and warm temperatures will be greeting the drivers. Anyone watching that's currently in the lobby, if they have any idea what the weather's going to be like for both qualifying and race, please do put it up in the chat, because obviously I have no idea myself, but I'm looking forward to this. Almost feels like a debut for me at One Hub. It's been so long since my wonderful voice has graced your airways. Looks like everyone is readying up just about fine. No connection issues there. 1 driver missing, I'm not too sure who it is. And we'll go through the standings, talk about the circuit in the next few minutes. But first and foremost, I've got a massive shout out obviously to Next Level Racing. It's raining, look at that. So Next Level Racing out there, obviously a proud sponsor of One Hub Racing, have been now for quite a while. Do go check their website out. They've got some fantastic seats, pedals, racing rig setups as well for the sim racer in mind, and of course they do donate prizes as well to the champions as well. So it's not just a case of we just give them a plug and a shout out. They do help the league to expand and grow, and they do offer prizes as well. Talking about prizes, of course, one of the big topics coming into the season was the fact that we're now charging drivers to race. You can pay £5 to just be a standard race driver for the season, or you can pay £10 to race premium, and they get a few little extra bonuses as well as having your name in nice gold writing, such as mine is as well. And looking for all the 3 tiers, half the drivers, it looks like, have signed up to Race Premium, which is really, really good. It's a few £100 if it goes towards One Hub Racing. It's not to go into the owner's pocket. It is to be spent on advertising, as well as the personalised engraved trophies for all of our champions across all tiers do receive, and they are some fantastic looking trophies indeed. So 17 minutes left of this session. Heavy rain by the looks of it. We've got a track map. Look at that. We have a track map. It's been so long since I've done this. So telemetry and lap data will bring up as well. Tyres fitted. It looks like intermediate running seems to be the way forward for these guys. Louis Welsh coming out of the pits in the Mercedes this season, last season's defending champion. We've got other drivers here as well who I commentated on last season. Midnight, for example, back in the Red Bull. We've got Ollie Flavel as well. He's been a part of One Hub for quite a while. Toxic Tomato was here last season, or I commentated on him last season. Same for Lakitu as well. Rafa, Paris Chapelele as well down there in the McLaren. Both the Williams then out together on circuit. Maybe they'll be looking to get some slipstreaming effects done for themselves. So quite a few drivers are already out on the circuit then, just a few in the pits. Cohen, it's Cohen, thank you very much, coming in on stream. Saying light rain at the end of the race, so I can only assume it's going to be a wet qualifying session, dry start to the race, and then like the podium tier as well, there'll be some light rain towards the end, so it could be very, very exciting. Another thing to talk about as well is the mandatory 2-stop rule. Now this is something that One Hub have done before in the past. They didn't have it in season 14 when I started commentating for One Hub, so this is a new thing for me. Essentially what it is, every driver has to pit twice. That's it. You can pit at the end of lap 1 if you want, even if you pick up accident damage and you damage your front wing, pick up a puncture, that still counts as one of your pit stops. And you can also pit going into the start of your final lap. Now, the way that works is if you're a lap down, you can't pit at the end of the final lap because that's your last lap. So you will be disqualified. So you have to pit at what will be the beginning of your final lap. So if you're a lap or 2 laps down for whatever reason, the drivers have to bear that in mind to make sure they pit before the end of the final lap. So it could make things quite exciting. Usually in dry races, you might see probably the softs and the medium tyres will dominate as well. But if people have to pit at the end of lap 1 or lap 2 to fix accident damage, then they might go onto the hard tyres, go quite long into the race, and then do a short stint towards the end of the race. And with the potential threat of light rain at the end as well, we might see 1 or 2 drivers try and stretch that second stint out to try and put on the intermediate tyres as their second stop towards the end of the race. We'll have to see how that all plays out as the drivers now start to come across the line to start some of their flying laps. We'll jump on board then with Louis, who's in the Rocket Williams this season. He'll be looking to defend his title. Just 10 races this season, very short season. F1 2020 has recently been announced. I think yesterday it was, at some point in July 10th, July 20th. I might have got that date wrong. So it's linked up quite nicely because this season will probably be over, I reckon, probably the end of May, beginning of June. So that'll give the drivers about a month of a bit of R&R before the sweatiness begins on F1 2020 as we look forward to season 16 at One Hub. And it'll be, of course, a full race calendar as well. So it's a short one this season, which is what they do to try and fill in the last few months before the new game comes out. And then just coming down the first part of the Mistral Straight into this left chicane. The Mistral Straight used to be back in the 80s and the very early 90s, before this circuit was taken off the F1 calendar. That straight used to be real, just one long straight. And back there in the 90s, you had a mix of V8, V10 and V12 engine cars hurtling down there at speeds of up to 200 mile an hour, and it's a fantastic sight to see. Go check on YouTube some of the older races at Paul Ricard and just listen to the various engines and notes going down that straight. It really is fantastic. The circuit itself, love-hate relationship with some of these guys. Quite a few people don't like this circuit for its bland, boring nature. The fact that it's pretty impossible really to hit the barriers around it. You make a mistake, you can easily recover. For me, Sector 1 and Sector 2 is a bit but I do quite enjoy Sector 3. It has a nice flow to it. If you hook it up really, really nicely, then you can find some good time and quite enjoy the circuit as well. STV Danny in the Mercedes here, just getting a bit of a twitchy oversteer there, coming through the double right-hander in these very challenging conditions. So a few people just filtering in now. Of course, they're watching the previous race that started at 7:30. That should be finishing probably in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm sure the numbers will creep up. But good evening to each and every single one of you that is slowly filtering in tonight to watch the action from the top tier here at Paul Ricard. VRT Chapelele coming on provisional pole with a 41.708. He's 2 tenths ahead of Westy in the Renault. Paris and Danny, the 2 S2V boys in the Mercedes, currently 3rd and 4th, and then Lakitu and T1000 Zach in 5th and 6th. So the standings then, 1 race down, 9 to go. The Mercedes boys dominated the first round. S2V Danny with 25 points, and Paris, his teammate, in 2nd place on 19, collected the fastest lap, finishing inside the top 10 as well. Taser Leroy in the Sport Pisa Racing Point in 3rd place with 15 points, and then it's T1000 Zach and Louis Welsh rounding out the top 5, and it's Midnight Tim I think I just called him Tim, in 7th place on 6 points. Then it's Cohen, SOR Hamilton and Ollie Flavel rounding out the top 10. Lakitu also with an extra World Championship point. So half the field then have set lap times so far, just waiting for the rest of the guys to filter out onto the circuit and post their first lap times as well. Quite cool having the track map there as well. You can see the busy periods of the circuit. Quite a few drivers in the pits. Looks like Sector 3 is quite busy as well, as drivers try to find themselves a little bit of space. You really don't want to be following cars in qualifying. Of course, you get that laggy, dirty, washy air over the front wing, which will cause your car to understeer quite badly and lose you lap time. And also following cars quite closely with the spray being kicked up from the rear wing, and the rear wheels will hinder your vision as well. So you really don't want to be anywhere near any drivers out on circuit. So Ollie Flavel then, he's already completed his first representable time lap, 42.869. He's ahead of Harry and Taze Leroy for 49, so he can pretty much ignore that. I'm pretty sure he can go quicker than 1 minute 49. Midnight, White Fountain still yet to set lap times. I'm quite excited to see what Midnight can do this season. He's worked his way up in the last couple of seasons from the bottom tier to the top tier, and he was one of my standout performers last season after moving from the Racing Point mid-season into the Red Bull. You move up from mid-tier team up to a top-tier team from like Racing Point to Red Bull, and your performances are expected to reflect that, and he certainly did, picking up a few race wins and a litany of podiums across the season. He was one of my top 5 standout performers last season, so I'm excited to see what he can do. He's currently up into P2 now after going a little bit quicker, 41.3. Louis Welsh now on provisional pole. That's not a surprise to see. You know, this youngster is a bit of an alien at the game, and he'll be looking then to kickstart his season after finishing outside the podium places in the first race. He'll be looking to lock up either a first or a second here and push on in his championship defence. So Chapelet still in third, Westy in fourth, Rafa in fifth. Josh then yet to set a lap time. Westy has retired from the session, so he feels that with even 10 minutes left, he feels like he cannot improve. I don't think he would have lost it anyway. We do have a yellow flag though out in sector 2 towards the end of the Mistral straight where Westy is parked. I don't believe he's crashed. I think he has just pulled off to the side of the circuit. So his teammate then yet to set a lap time. Same for Tim as well in the Alfa Romeo. He's coming up to the line now. This is an out lap, I believe. So he's starting his first flying lap now. We'll jump on board with the Alfa Romeo driver. Coming down to the very blind and tricky turn 1, turn 2 section. You really don't see the apex until you're pretty much on top of it. Don't be surprised to see quite a few people track extend there in both qualifying and the race and pick up invalidations and penalties. Now down this little kinky little kinking straight down into turns 3, 4, 5 and 6. And this is a very slow part of the circuit as well. The understeer and oversteer really can hurt and hinder your lap time as well. He's got a car in front of him. Hopefully that will jump out of the way. Through as well, a little lift in the right hander, but we straighten up the car and it's flat air through the little kink of the left. Now onto the first of 2 parts of the Mistral straight. That will be one of the DRS zones you can just see there. Deactivated of course in wet weather conditions as we punder down all the way to the Rolex sign. You want to miss the first chicane. The second chicane is the one you want to take. Multiple lines can be taken through here, or multiple layouts I should say, and through the left, right, left sequence of a chicane onto the second part of this Mistral straight. Still following his Toro Rosso, so he might be gaining a little bit with the toe. You can see there he's gone purple in sector 2, so this is looking like quite a good lap so far from the Alfa Romeo driver. Ferrari pulling over to the right hand side. Oh, you can just see the oversteer there, the back end of the car wanting to overtake the front. The Toro Rosso's off the circuit ahead. It's Curran. Hopefully he'll stay out the way now. He does, but he's made it a bit difficult there for Tim trying to get to the apex. This is a very slow corner and you want to straighten up the car on exit. Short burst all the way up through this right hand kink to the long left hander. Pit lane entrance there on the right hand side has been modified to reflect real life, and then over to the left for the very slow final right hand corner in second gear. You want to short shift up into third and fourth if you can to try and kill the wheel spin. The second DRS zone is there. Up to the line he comes, and he's lost a bit of time on that lap, probably held up a little bit by Cohen there, not really wondering what he was going to do on the side of a circuit. But the Alfa Romeo driver with just under 8 minutes left of the session puts himself comfortably inside the top 10 with the 6th best time. Josh meanwhile has now set his first lap and has jumped ahead of his teammate up into a very promising P4. Midnight, Danny and Louis Welsh currently lead the way here in qualifying. 7.5 minutes left to go and all these guys are getting ready for a second run. So it looks like the Williams drivers of Louis and Rafa are going to be working quite closely together in qualifying. Rafa was probably the one that gave Louis a tow first time round, so it might be Louis this time giving a bit of a help to Rafa possibly. They'll probably change positions at some point, so it's unusual to see teammates working together at a circuit like France, certainly in conditions like this. They could have just left the pits by mistake at the same time and they might create a bit of distance between themselves. You will see at some circuits like Italy and Belgium, whether they're there or not this season, I'm unsure actually. I can't remember the calendar off the top of my head. My homework's been a bit lax so far, so I'll have to catch up on that. But yeah, some circuits where the slipstream is very powerful, you'll be expecting to see teammates together, as Louis and Rafa have exchanged positions. Circuits like this, not so much, but you will still see a couple of teammates out there trying their best. Gareth Hall comes in, hashtag Team Harry. Harry then, I assume you mean, is Harry BR25, currently down in P14. He's completed 4 laps on that set of intermediate tyres, so this qualifying qualifying, or the first half of his qualifying session was more of a test session for him, just getting out there in these difficult conditions and trying to work out where the grip levels are and if he can find some extra speed and pace at certain points of the circuit. So he's coming in 14th place on a 43.020. So Louis then over the line. He has created a several second gap to his teammates, so they're just leaving the pits at the same time. Don't look like they're working together on circuit. Danny back out on circuit as well on an outlap, same for Midnight. Josh in the pits, Paris in the other Mercedes also out there as well, and he is on a flying lap then. So this is Paris. This is a driver I've known for a few years. I've raced against him before, I believe. I've certainly commentated on him before. I know he's a very quick driver. He's also a very sideways driver there through the right-hander as well. So he's definitely exploring the limits of grip that are available to him in this AMG Mercedes. I did miss his sector 2 time. Not too sure if he's up or not, but he's in ERS mode 0, and he's coming back into the pits by the looks of it. So he's either made a mistake or he's down on his sector times, and he feels that it's pointless him going out there, staying out there I should say. So back into the pits for the Mercedes driver. Chapelele out on circuit at the moment. He's currently in 7th place for the McLaren team. Tim also back out there as well. We saw him a few minutes ago up in 6th place. He's now down in 8th. The key 2 coming into the pits, and Taze Leroy completes the top 10. So Rafa then, he's a 10th and a half up on his previous best, which will be good enough actually to get him up inside the top 10 in 10th place. And of course, running on these intermediate tyres, probably the worst place you want to qualify in dry conditions is 10th place, because it means you're locked into the tyres that you set your quickest time on, and everyone behind you gets a fresh set of tyres. But in these conditions, it doesn't matter. Everyone will be able to choose whatever tyres they want, and there'll be a fresh set of whatever tyres they want going into the race, because obviously they're running in the wet here in qualifying. So Rafa then will jump on board of the Williams driver, getting a little tow from Danny just ahead of him, coming up to the line. Louis increases his lap time to 1 minute 40, and Rafa puts in a very, very strong lap there. Joins his teammate on the front row, 6 tenths off of his teammate, but he won't mind too much. It's a Williams 1-2 at the moment, and imagine if we were seeing that in real life. So Danny in 3rd position, Midnight in 4th, Josh down in 5th. Where is Paris? Oh, he's back in the pits, isn't he? So other drivers and yet to set lap times. So I scroll through. Is Ella Cohen in the Toro Rosso. He's just coming through the final corner now. Looks like a flying lap, but it won't be the quickest one that we'll see today. Indeed, it's only good enough for 15th place. Toxic Tomato, the other driver, yet to set a lap time. He's coming back in the pits now, so he's leaving it very, very late to try and get a respectable lap time on the board. And MNT Lion has retired from the session, so he will be starting at the back of the field. Both the Williams drivers are just running side by side as they come back into the pits. I believe their session may very well be over now. You really need to be leaving the pits with about 2 minutes left to make sure you get yourself round with plenty of time. These guys are only halfway around the circuit with under 3 minutes left. So Louis and Rafa will not be out again. S2V Danny at the moment is, I think, on a flying lap. He's on a lap, that's for sure, but he's not really pushing that hard in EOS mode number 3 as well. So I think he's just backed off this lap, and he'll probably be going again. Midnight and all of this, I believe he's not on a flying lap either. His ERS has been turned off. So Danny is now coming around to, I think, set himself up. So here comes Danny then. This will be his final lap. He hasn't got a lot of ERS. In fact, he's only got 43% to use, and he has backed off. That was in fact a flying lap from him. He didn't look like it, so I do apologise. He has managed to get himself up into 2nd place. So the top 3 then, their sessions are now over, I think, although Rafa is going again. I do apologise. Rafa is going again. Louis is going again. So these guys have put a fair bit of fuel in their car then. They're going out there for multiple runs here towards the end of a session, which is a little surprising to me, but the track conditions will continue to improve as this session goes on then. So this qualifying is not over then. Louis is going again. He might have invalidated there. In fact, he has. Louis has invalidated. So unfortunately then his qualifying is now, I think, going to be over. Danny as well, we know his session is over. Rafa, I think, has invalidated. I think this is the first time I've commentated. I might sound a bit thick here. I have been out of this for a few months. I think then that when the track map on the right hand side goes red when we're watching someone, that means basically invalidation, because as soon as Louis extended on the exit of turn 2, that track map went red. So that's quite a clear indicator then that this lap time that they're on will not count. So I don't know if they've got enough fuel to get round again. They've probably got enough time to get round again, Cohen retires from the session down in 16th place. Midnight in the pits, his session is over. Josh is off the circuit. He was up, but he's off the circuit now, so his lap is ruined. He might be able to go again. So where are these top guys in all of this? Louis and Rafa are just gearing themselves up. They've got plenty of ERS, so they should be able to go again. Same for Danny as well. I think Danny is the first one that will be crossing the line, so he will definitely go again. Here he comes around the final corner. That was the Renault of Josh just going back into the pit, so we know his session is over as well. Midnight is out on circuit, but I don't think he's going to have enough time to get around. And yeah, he's clearly not. He's only just done the exit of turn 2. So Louis then, he is going to go again. Danny is on a flying lap now. Same for Rafa as well. That's the top 3 we really have to keep an eye on as well. Paris though, where is he in all of this? He's a 10th and a half up in sector 1. He needs to find well over a second if he wants to take pole position, but he only needs to find about 6 tenths to get himself up on the front row of the grid. Lakitu moves up into 5th place just at the end of the session. The session is now over. Midnight, Josh and Hamilton's sessions are over. There's a few others that have retired as well, so we'll stay with Paris to see how he goes, because he's ahead of the 4 drivers that I think can really challenge for pole position. That's the two Mercedes and the 2 Williams drivers. He's purple in sector 2, 3.5 tenths up now. He's going quicker and quicker. The rain has stopped as well, so lap times may very well improve at the end of this session, which is why these drivers have stayed out there, knowing that the conditions were going to slowly improve in the later part of this session. So Paris then, he's looking good at the moment to definitely jump up onto the second row of the grid. Finds a couple more attempts, he could be on the front row of the grid here. I don't know if he's going to be beating Louis' time, but he's certainly giving it everything he's got as he comes up to the final couple of corners now. He hasn't invalidated as far as I can tell. So around the left-hander now, the tight right-hander at the end of the lap. Straighten up that car, hammer it up through the gears, use all of your ERS that's available. Over the line he comes, and Paris was in 8th, up into P4, where is Danny and all of this then. So Paris can do no better than 4th position, but still a very good lap from the Mercedes driver. What can his teammate do? 6 tenths to get up onto pole position, but I think that's going to be a real hard target to beat. He does improve, but only marginally. Where is Louis and all of this? He is just ahead of his teammate. So I think pole position is going to be secured for Louis, so we'll have to watch Rafa to see what he can do. Coming into the final corner now, he needs to find just over a tenth and a bit if he wants to join his teammate on the front row of the grid. Coming up to the line now at the end of the session, does Rafa improve? He doesn't. He misses out on the front row of the grid by just a couple of hundredths. And Toxic Tomato there, what a surprise that is. He's left it very, very late up onto the front row of the grid. That is a surprise, but a fantastic lap, completely missed by me in that McLaren, and he'll be incredibly happy then to get right up amongst those big boys. Taze Leroy as well up into 7th place. I think that is the session over. Everyone else has finished or in the pits or retired, so it's Louis Welchen that takes pole position here by half a second ahead of Toxic Tomato. Surprised to see him in 2nd, Danny in 3rd, Rafa in 4th, and Paris rounding out the top 5. So there we go, and just to recap, the Williams of Louis takes pole position with a lap of a 1 minute 40.575, almost half a second ahead of Toxic Tomato's McLaren. And then it's S2V, Danny, Rafa and Paris rounding out the top 5. Midnight in 6th, Taze Leroy in 7th, Lakitu, Josh in the Renault, and T1000 Zach rounding out the top 10. Then we have Shapalele, Tim in 12th, Westy in 13th, Hamilton 44 in 14th, Ollie Flavel down in 15th, Harry in 16th, LR Cohen in 17th, his teammate just behind him in 18th place. I'm going to take a short break here. I'll be back with you guys during the formation lap. So the drivers away now then on the formation lap, being led around by last season's champion Louis Welsh in the Williams. Toxic Tomato in second, Danny in third. So then we'll bring up some information. Tyres, that's what we're going to need. So then, usual F1 rules do not apply because the qualifying session was wet. If it was dry, of course, in qualifying, then these drivers inside the top 10 would be starting on the tyres they set their fastest lap on. But because it was wet throughout and everyone set their lap times in the intermediate tyres, of course they can't start on the intermediate tyres in conditions like this. So all the drivers, all the way from first down to 19th, have a free choice of what tyres to start on, and of course they are a very, very fresh set. So there's a bit of a mix. Most of them, it looks like pretty much a 50-50 split actually on the softs and the mediums. No one's going on the hard tyres. I think this will be a race dominated by the soft and the medium tyres. The top two then, Lou Welsh and Toxic, have gone for the soft tyres. Danny is on the mediums. Rafa also joining the top two on those soft tyres. And further down you can see everyone else. Most of the guys starting towards the back going for the mediums. Harry on the softs in 16th. And it's going to be an interesting one, this, because with the mandatory two-stop rule, you know, some of these guys in the softs will be pitting quite early. The mediums will be going a bit longer, but you might see some of them drop in a bit early and maybe do another stint on the mediums, softs towards the end. And of course, there's the threat of the rain towards the end of the race. I think some people are going to be keeping that in mind. You might see some people maybe double stinting on the mediums, hoping and praying that they have to make the change onto the intermediate tyres, because the last thing you want to do is be making your mandatory two stops and then have to make a third stop towards the end to put on the intermediate tyres. It's a slow pit lane here, it's a long pit lane here, you lose a lot of time. So this is a race that's going to continually develop and change. We really won't know the full running order until everyone has completed their two stops, and then of course we have this threat of rain towards the end. So the drivers are just coming around the field onto the grid now. Looks like pretty much everyone has behaved himself, no disqualifications and resets to the grid. And it's a good mix of cars and drivers up there as well. You'd be expecting, you know, with the team bosses and the requirements that these drivers need, you need to be, you know, sort of the best drivers in the best teams. But we've got two Williams here on the top two rows of the grid. There's a Red Bull in there, there's a Racing Point, there's a McLaren in second place of Toxic Tomato as well. So this is a real good opportunity for a lot of these drivers to really show their worth here. As we now wait for all the drivers to sync up, line up, and here we go then for round two of the Pinnacle tier at France. We've got 5 lights on now, and the lights go out and we're racing at Paul Ricard. Good start by Louis, I think. Toxic Tomato on the outside as they run down into turn one. Look for action in the middle towards the back of the field as well. Louis with the inside line holds on to that lead. Toxic Tomato in second place as well. Danny remains in third. Rafa and Paris follow through as well. There's changes further back. Looks like Midnight's had an instant further back. He's hemorrhaging positions all the way down to the bottom of the field. But it's Louis that's held on to that lead. Toxic in second. Danny, Rafa and Paris come through as well. We filter back towards the midfield. Looks like the Ferrari drivers are in combat with each other and the Renault of Westy there. Lakitu's managed to get ahead of him. A few drivers running wide over that asphalt as well as they come onto the Mistral straight. Oh, a little bit of contact I think there between Lakitu and Westy, and T1000 Zach might take advantage of this. Will jump on board with the Ferrari driver. Now back to Westy as well as they come down into this left, right, left chicane. Look for action again. There might be a bit of contact as well round the outside. Now the inside for Westy. It'd be difficult to keep side by side through it, but he's managed to make it stick. Tim as well has managed to take advantage of that as these midfield guys really do battle. Will filter back through the field. Doesn't look like anyone's got any significant damage. We've got Midnight at the tail end of the field. Something definitely happened to him. He looks okay though, so he can carry on. We've got Hamilton as well. He's off the circuit, might have made contact with someone, so now he's at the back of the field, but Louis still leads the way halfway around lap 1. Toxic in second position, slowly starting to pull away already from Danny on those medium tyres, and Rafa in fourth position. Will want to get past this Mercedes sooner rather than later to give chase to the top two through the final corner to complete lap 1 of 27. Changing the ERS and the fuel mixes all the time. Fastest lap of course to Louis, he leads the way. And Paris is further back as well. We've got Taze Leroy and Josh fighting it out down into turn 1 for 6th and 7th. Watched on closely by the McLaren of Shapalele. Lakitu and Tim complete the the top 10. They're all through turn 1 and turn 2 safely. Midnight and Hamilton had an incident on lap 1. They haven't pitted, so clearly if they've got any damage, you're going to carry it, or they managed to get away with no damage. So no lap 1 casualties then, which is good to see. This field's still very close together. You can see the Chapelele just hanging on to the back of Josh as well, who's trying to put the pressure on Taze Leroy. Good exit from that corner from Josh then, and I think he might be shaping up a move on this racing point. Leroy defends early to the left hand side. He's made his move, he's going to have to stick, and Josh then is bouncing off the revs. Here comes Chapelele as well. It could be 3 wide into the chicane. We'll see what happens here when we come down to it. Oh, very deep into there from Chapelele as he manages to get past Josh, so he'll be unhappy about that. Josh might try to get a bit of a run back on him coming into the long right-hander at the end of Mistral. And Dave Chapelele is managing to pull away just a little bit. Keep the pressure on Taze Leroy. Back into that racing point looking a little twitchy. And these guys still in very close formation, almost giving a bit of a love tap there to the back of Leroy. You don't want to be doing that too many times. You don't want to pick up any unnecessary damage on that front wing. Midnight has now slowly started to catch up to the back of the field. Hamilton still a few seconds shy. So we'll filter back through the rest of the midfield. It's very close back here. Tim in 10th, Westy in 11th. Zach has dropped a few positions down into 12th. Ollie Flavel has gained a couple of positions, I think, up into 13th. Now into lap 3. A new fastest lap then from Louis as all of the cars there. Beautiful cascade of blues, blacks, pinks, reds, yellows, greens and silvers make their way into lap 3. DRS then is now activated. 2 zones. Zone number 1 across the main straight. Zone number 2 is the first half of the Mistral straight. So be looking for some overtakes in both of those preceding corners. So we'll bring up then the position changes. We've got a yellow. Oh, Chapelele, what's happened to you, my friend? He's spinning backwards down at the end of the first sector, so he might have made contact with someone, dropped him all the way down into 18th place. So I don't think he's got any damage. So we'll look then at the position changes. The top 5 remain as they are. Leroy and Josh have made a couple of positions up. Tim and Westy have made 3 positions up. Same for Ollie and Harry. Lion from the back of the field has made 5. And the biggest losers, unfortunately, is Midnight, losing 11 positions. Chapelele and Hamilton as well towards the back of the field. No one's made a pit stop yet. And that is the tyre graph again. So Louis still leads the way. 3 or 4 tenths ahead of Toxic Tomato. They are slowly but consistently pulling away from Danny, but he has now managed to drop Rafa. So Rafa was behind him a lap ago. Now he's a second and a half back. So maybe maybe Rafa's made a mistake, or these soft tyres are already starting to grain up a little bit. So then Paris in 5th. He's a second ahead of Leroy, so he won't be getting the DRS. I think this top 5 will slowly disappear. Someone dived into the pits. Who's that? That's Rafa. So yeah, indeed, Rafa was already losing time on those soft tyres. We've also got another early pitter. That's Westy then. So at the end of 3 laps, some of these guys, or a couple of these guys, are coming off of the soft tyres straight away. Chapelele and Midnight also in as well. So is this going to be a change onto the softs or the mediums for Rafa? Looks like a set of medium tyres. So that's one of his mandatory 2 stops completed. Westy as well going on to the medium tyres. Same for Chapelele and Midnight, who's having a front wing change. So he did pick up damage. So then some of these guys already in the pits. Lakitu is hemorrhaging positions as well. What's happened to him? He has recovered onto the circuit, but he's picked up a 3-second time penalty. So I think he's had an off somewhere, an incident with someone else or by himself. And he's now down in 13th place. So Rafa, Westy, Chapelele and Midnight have already made their first of 2 mandatory stops. We'll have to see how that strategy plays out as the race goes on. M&T Lion and Taze Leroy, the racing points in a big of a duel over the final points position, followed very closely by Cohen in the Toro Rosso. Is he going to try a move here? He's not. He's going to have to filter back in line, but Lion slightly off line there, which gave Cohen half of an opportunity. But this isn't really an overtaking area of the circuit. But M&T Lion and Leroy are fighting amongst themselves. Oh, big snap of oversteer there from Cohen as he loses a bit of that front downforce following these racing points. Louis Welsh and Toxic Tomato now into the pits at the end of lap 4. So the Mercedes of Danny and Paris will take over the lead. Josh also coming into the pits. Tim, I believe, is carrying on. He is indeed. Will Harry pit? He is as well. So a couple of the soft runners are carrying on, but a majority of the medium runners are obviously going to go a few laps longer into this race. The 5 laps in now of 27. And this, I think, is going to be a fantastic thing about this mandatory two-stop rule. Certainly everyone's starting on whatever tyres they want. It really does mix it up a little bit. I think it's a great rule, to be honest. I don't know why it wasn't here for season 14. I joined in season 14. It appeared quite popular before, and it's back this season, and no one's really complained about it. And it really does open things up. You've got different strategy options out there, different drivers on different tyres, different wear rates at different points of the race, and that's why we're going to be seeing so many position changes throughout this race. We've got a change for position there actually, as Zach moves past Tim into third position. So I think Tim's soft tyres are past their best at the moment, and he's going to start losing time and possibly positions. But the Mercedes drivers are split by 3.5 seconds, so they won't be hindering each other, and they'll be pushing on these medium tyres as far as they think necessary before their first of 2 pit stops. Tim, I believe, will be in at the end of this lap. Probably the same for Harry as well, who's risen up the field quite well, starting towards the back in 15th, 16th, something like that. He's now up into 6th place. The racing, but nearly called them Force Indias there, didn't I? The racing points, 7th and 8th, still very close together. Cohen's dropped off somehow, so he might have made a mistake somewhere, because he's now got the attentions of the Ferrari with Likitu behind him in 10th place. So does Tim and Harry pit. Harry's carrying on, but Tim is in. So Hamilton, we know, is recovering through the field. So both the Haas drivers going long on their first stint on the soft tyres. And Tim will rejoin somewhere down towards the back of the field. In fact, Hamilton is coming into the pits as well, so these guys will join further back down. So Toxic Tomato, then we know he's made a pit stop. He's now climbing back up the order into 11th place. Louis is a couple of seconds up the road. There is Rafa as well. So those three are still pretty much the same distance as they were before the pit stop, so nothing has become untoward of them. So we'll try and see how these Mercedes drivers tackle this next few laps. We've got a yellow flag and sector 3. That's Midnight out of the race. So something's happened to Midnight further back. Where is he on the track map? Looks like he's in the pits. So he might have come into the pits and called it a day. We do ask drivers, if they are going to retire, don't do it on track, do it in the pits. We don't want drivers to retire for whatever reason. Everyone finished in the podium tier. The 19 that started all finished. Not too sure about the previous tier, how many finished that one. But we've already lost one driver here. Midnight then obviously fell towards the back of the field at the beginning of the race, has failed to recover, and feels that he doesn't want to spend the rest of his evening pounding around for position nothing. So he's pulled into the pits to retire, which is what we ask the drivers to do. So Louis then, he's the lead driver then, that's already made a pit stop, I believe. We'll have a quick look. Indeed, yes, White Fountain is the only one from the bottom half of this field, if you like, that's yet to make a pit stop. Everyone else has. So we'll have to keep one eye on when Danny and Paris do pit, and we'll have to keep an eye on as well of Louis, Toxic Tomato and Rafa as they slowly start to make their way through the field. But Louis is 8 seconds behind Cohen, so it's going to take a few laps before he starts to catch up with traffic, as Harry does now become our final driver that started on the soft tyres into the pit. 6 laps completed on those soft tyres. Might have pushed him a bit too far. We'll see where he rejoins, and he fastest lap from Louis, a 1:32.974 on those fresh set of medium tyres. Harry will probably rejoin, I think, just behind Tim, so that'll be a P16. Where's Chapelele and all this? He's coming up to the line, but Harry is now coming back out on the circuit. Now we'll jump aboard with a McLaren driver. There is Harry ahead. So the Haas drivers then probably went a bit too long on those soft tyres. They're now running down in 16th and 18th. As for the Mercedes, they're still carrying on though. 3.9 now between Danny and Paris. So Danny is finding a couple of attempts extra a lap. They're both clear of Zach in third position, who's a couple of seconds clear of Ollie. But Lion, Leroy, Likitu, they're all quite close behind as well. So the top three kind of settling into their own rhythm at the moment. They don't want any disruptions or distractions around them. Obviously their tyre wear rate will be creeping higher and higher with each passing sector. But the mediums can go, I think, comfortably 12, 13 laps here. Definitely cover at least half of the race. But if these guys are preparing for the rain shower at the end and want to make their second stop for the intermediate, so they have to push these mediums quite far into the race. If they're just going to go for it and do their 2 stops without thinking about the rain, then the medium runners might be in before lap 8 or 9. Indeed, Paris is pitting at the end of lap 7 then. It might be a lap or 2 a bit early. So he might be, I think he's clearly then deciding to throw caution and go for the mandatory 2-stop without considering the rain shower. Is it another set of medium tyres? It is. So he's going medium, medium. We'll jump on board with Louis. because this is now going to be a true potential position change, and Paris doesn't manage to get the jump. All of these guys managed to get ahead of him. White Fountain might even get the jump. Where is Paris? Just coming out the pits now, so Paris is safe ahead, but he has dropped a few seconds behind Rafa. Danny though was about 3.5 seconds ahead. Paris is now 3.5 seconds behind Rafa, so if Danny pits it in this lap, he could come out pretty much side by side with Rafa for 10th place. But Toxic Tomato and Louis will resume their P1 and P2. Harry picks up a 3-second time penalty for yeeting it off the circuit one too many times. That will be a bit of a fixture around here. It's quite easy to pick up warnings around here and track extend. I think in the races we've seen already tonight, a few people, not everyone, but quite a few people have picked up 3 or 6 seconds worth of penalties. Could change things towards the end of the race, certainly if we get a mid-race or a late race safety car. Very uncommon here to have a safety car due to the expansive runoff areas. The cars can be recovered and disappeared quite quickly. So Louis then, he's halved that gap to Curran in the last couple of laps, which is to be expected. He's the quicker driver on the fresher medium tyres. And all these guys will be going as long as they deem necessary. We'll come back up to Danny. He is carrying on. We've got a position change here as Lion and Likitu jump into the pits, as does Leroy, as does Cohen as well. So it just leaves 3 drivers in yet to make their 4 drivers, in fact, yet to make their first pit stop. White Fountain down in 12th is yet to be into the pit. So the position changes will happen, and what's happening here with the racing points, that's an unusual thing. I'm pretty sure that Leroy was that's one way to get your car service, isn't it? Just don't pull into your pit box and just get the tyres that way. So I'm not too sure what the hell happened there. But Lion is still out ahead of his teammates, so one of them definitely got held up in the pits. Coming back out into a bit of traffic here, Harry and Chapalele fighting hard over 12th and 13th have now got the likes of Lion, Lakitu, Cohen and Leroy close behind on a fresh set of mediums. So Danny, Zach and Ollie Flavel in the top 3 yet to make their first pit stop. So the true order really is Louis leading Toxic Tomato and Rafa in the top 3 positions. Lap 9 of 27, 1/3 of this race completed. Still plenty of action, more to come. Yeah, there's a great little battle here between Lion and Chapalele over 13th and 14th. We've got to be very careful to not make contact. They have made contact, and Chapalele is getting his drift on there into the inside of the circuit. That was always going to happen, I felt, around that corner. Chapalele has rejoined to the circuit. I don't believe he has any damage on the front of that car. I think it was just tyre on the sidewall, but that's disappointing for Chapalele. He was trying a battle there with Lion, and unfortunately 2 into 1 will not go, and the McLaren driver is the one that's come off worst. Ollie Flavel now into the pits, coming off the medium tyres, so he gives up that P3, promoting Louis, Toxic Tomato and everyone else up 1 position. And I think Ollie will rejoin. Where has he rejoined? He has comfortably rejoined in 11th place, just ahead of Lion and Harry. And the key to is keeping a watchful eye on that trio as well. So Hamilton then down in 18th place, picks up a 3-second time penalty. Being a difficult race for the Haas drivers so far. Neither of them really challenging. Oh, Harry there, a bit too much throttle application there, as he's still trying to find the grip levels to come through the right hander. Almost spun it round, but collected it and controlled it very nicely. But he might come under attack here from Likitu. Coming into the chicane, Likitu has a half an attempt, but decides to slot back in line further up. Ollie and Lion fighting over 11th and 12th, but the Racing Point keeps ahead. Chapalele has managed to get past Cohen as well. White Fountain picks up a 3-second time penalty, but we'll come back up to Daniel, and he's going very long into this race. At least 11 laps in on these medium tyres. The beautiful sunshine we had at the start of this race has now disappeared and is being taken over by some pretty heavy cloud cover. Looks pretty grey and miserable and gloomy up there, so the rain may be here sooner rather than later. For those of you joining now or missed the start of the stream, you can either scroll to the top with the chat if that's something you're able to do to see the weather report, or listen to me talk about it. What we've got then, we had a wet qualifying session and we've got rain predicted for the end of this race. Whether it arrives in time for the change onto the intermediate tyres, or these drivers can struggle around on the dry tyres, remains to be seen. But certainly in the last few laps, the sunshine has disappeared, the shadows have gone, and it is looking rather dark and gloomy here in France as Taser Leroy retires from a lowly 18th place. So it's 2 drivers with the 19 that started that we've now lost. And Danny continues to pound his way around. Looks like Leroy then has pulled into the pit, same as Midnight has done, and has decided to retire in the pit lane. So thank you very much. We don't need unnecessary safety cars or virtual safety cars from drivers intentionally ending their race in the barriers. It's not really a professional thing to do, and the drivers are penalised for it. So pulling into the pits and retiring is the best and only option that we offer these drivers. So Westy then down in 8th place, passes his teammate but picks up a 3-second time penalty for his troubles. Lion as well in 10th is passing White Fountain, who's going very long into this race as well. Ollie will be looking to try and get past him. He's recently made his first of 2 pit stops onto those medium tyres. He started on the mediums, he's still on the mediums. So this is another driver I think that is looking towards the rain shower. And look at this, Lion and Josh really fighting over, 9th and 10th position. Lion has put a move on White Fountain and a couple of others recently as well. He was involved in the contact with Chapelele a couple of laps ago, which forced Chapelele off the circuit. Round the outside here for Lion. This will be a very sweet move. He manages to complete it up the inside now into the final corner, and he has managed to make that move stick. Might get the cutback though for Josh behind, but Lion is really getting the hammer down now. Slightly fresher set of medium tyres as well. Ollie has now managed to get past White Fountain. I don't think the Toro Rosso driver would put up too much of a fight. He knows his medium tyres are pretty much dead at this point, and he's just pushing on as far as he can to make this strategy work. Is there rain slowly coming down? It is. So then, the predicted rain shower towards the end of the race has arrived in the middle of the race, and maybe that is the fault of the 3 drivers that have yet to make a pit stop. Danny and Zach, P1 and P2, and White Fountain down in 12th place. Now this will... okay, I'm a bit unsure about this. If they decide to pit now onto the intermediate tyres and can go to the end, well, they've only made 1 pit stop, because these 3 haven't pitted yet. I'm pretty sure that no matter what the weather is like, you have to make 2 pit stops. So I'm not too sure if this is going to work out. They probably would have wanted the rain to arrive a bit later. We'll have to see how this race continually develops. It is quite fascinating and fantastic looking at this mandatory 2-stop rule. Samster has come in just to confirm. They tend to keep things very official for the first season of the game, and then add the 2-stop rule back for the shortened season to spice things up. So there we go then. So it looks like then every other season pretty much we have the mandatory 2-stop rule, because every other season we have the shortened calendar. So Westy and Lion, Westy and Lion battling over now PA, and Lion is really progressing up the lower part of his top 10 quite nicely as well. He's pretty much been putting an overtake on every lap. We've got Ollie in the background now. I think he was shaping up a half a move on Josh. So these Renault boys in 9th and 10th. Home race for the team here at France. They're slowly starting to fall further and further down inside the top 10. So this rain is now here, and we'll have to see when it negates a change onto the intermediate tyres. We will be making a change onto the intermediate tyres. I'll be very surprised if these drivers can remain on the dry tyres till the end of this race. And this midfield pack is very, very close. Lion, Westy, Josh, Ollie, Lakitu trying to jump in the back of it as well. You just see the Ferrari in the background, and White Fountain doing a very good job of just about hanging on in 13th place. So Tim then in 7th. Is now coming under attack from Lion. Lion with the DRS coming into the braking zone for the chicane. Halfway down this Mistral straight, you might be able to get another opportunity into the long right-hander, but these track conditions are now slowly going to start changing. Again, we'll have a quick look just to see the pit stop situation. Indeed, Danny, Zach and White Fountain are the only ones yet to make their first of 2 stops. And I think some of these guys are now starting to find the pace. Oh, up the inside there. That's a late move in a place you really don't see an overtake, but Lion has managed to do it clean. And he's up into 7th place. Good performance so far from the Racing Point driver, who really is carving his way through that mid-pack. Yes, he's on a slightly fresh set of medium tyres, but catching is one thing, passing is another. And apart from that incident with Chapelele a few laps ago, he has kept it relatively clean. Into the pits now then. So then, this is going to be our first indication of what the weather is doing. Josh follows him in just a couple of seconds behind. Are they going on to another set of dry tyres, or are they making the change now onto the intermediates? The intermediates are out for Josh. They're also out there for Shapalele, and it's a late call. It was a late call then for Lion, or was it? No, we're still getting glitches with the Racing Point mechanics. I'm not too sure what's going on there. So then, the change is now happening onto the intermediate tyres for most of our midfield runners. And that might be a wake-up call for everyone else. We usually see the lower half of the field and the midfield runners making a change onto the intermediate tyres first to try and find some sort of an advantage. The guys running at the front will be a bit more cautious. They don't want to pit too soon onto the intermediate tyres and hemorrhage lap times and positions. But the last thing you want to do is leave it too late. Danny, I think, is really now starting to struggle. LR Cohen picks up a 5-second penalty for crossing the pit lane exit white line. And will Danny come into the pits now? He will, but he's made a bit of a mess of it, but he should be able to recover. Slow the car down to 37 mile an hour. Indeed he is. Indeed he has. And now as we go into the second half of this race, Danny now coming in then to make the change onto the medium tyres. Zach is going to follow him in. What will Louis do? Is he going to come into the pits? He is going to come into the pits. As I have a slight seizure with my words. DRS has now been disabled. This is the time then for the drivers to come in. It took about 2 laps then for the track conditions to completely change. Toxic almost sped into the pits there. Rafa making a meal of coming into the pits as well. Is he going to get it slowed down in time? He just about does it. Paris is in. Tim will be in as well. And all of these drivers are now making the change onto the intermediate tyres. So this has worked out really, really well for Danny and Zach. They have inherited the lead by staying out on those medium tyres, and they now rejoin in P1 and P2 with a sizable gap over Louis. He'll be disappointed that they managed to make those medium tyres last for pretty much half the race and make the safe change onto the intermediate. So our early race leader Louis is now 5 seconds behind Zach, who in turn is nearly 10 seconds behind Danny. Toxic is out in 4th position, Rafa in 5th, Paris in 6th. We would have expected that. Tim, Ollie and the rest of the midfield all squabbling over positions. The early pit stop men for Lion and Josh hasn't changed too much. They haven't really gained anything. Ollie now inside the top 10, Likitu in 11th. And the rest of the guys in the pits at the moment then. So everyone now onto the intermediate tyres. Pretty much, I think. Right, so then maybe if someone more in the know in me can tell me, looking at the stops there, now we're into intermediate running. Everyone apart from White Fountain, Zach and Danny don't need to stop again. So anyone out there want to tell me? Do these guys that have only done 1 stop need to pit again? Josh is off the circuit. He's made a mistake somewhere. Where is he? Oh, he's spinning. He's pirouetting on the straight. So he's obviously lost it somewhere. Probably in the fast left hand of it. Back end has stepped out, and unfortunately that Renault driver is now down in 15th. His teammate Westy in 14th as well. These guys were about 7th and 8th a few laps ago, and now they're towards the back of the field. Has Harrington managed to get past Josh going into the chicane? Indeed he has. Josh, I think, is off the circuit again, or is he just going a bit slowly? He's still recovering to the circuit. So unfortunately Josh is now back down into 17th. He's got front wing damage as well, so I think he has made contact with someone. He has made contact with someone. And the One Hub, whoever's in charge of the One Hub YouTube account, has just come in saying yes they do. So, and Samster as well, just saying have to 2-stop no matter what. So then there we go. Danny, Zach and who else was it? White Fountain. It hasn't worked out for them. They're going to have to pit again at some point before the end of the race. So really it changes again. Louis is our net race leader. So that'll be good news to Louis and bad news to Danny and Zach. It would have worked out perfectly for me if this 2-stop rule wasn't in place, but it is. And they will have to give up P1 and P2 at some point. So all they can do now is throw caution to the wind and push as hard and as far as they can. And eventually they're going to have to come in at some point in the next 10 or 11 laps for another set of the intermediate tyres to get them to the end. So you've got yellow flag in sector 3. Josh has called it a day. Third driver then pulling into the pits. Thank you very much. Obviously, the incidents he's had in the last couple of laps have killed his spirit, and he feels that there's no point in him carrying on. So we're down to 16, so still a healthy number. At some points last season, when I was commentating on the Prestige tier, we had some races where there were quite a lot of retirements, silly retirements as well. But the drivers are cleaning up their act. And we've still got 16 guys running. John Wayne is an actual guy commentating. Yes, I am a human man. And I'm sitting here talking about this as it goes on. So Danny leads 10.2 seconds ahead of Zach. Louis is slowly starting to close in on the Ferrari driver. It was just over 5 seconds when these two emerged from the pit lane. It's now down to 3.67, 3.8. And Toxic is 9 seconds back now, so I think Toxic is struggling in these conditions a little bit, but he has a healthy 7 point something gap to Rafa. But Paris is now starting to put the pressure on the media, the Williams, I should say, not the medium, the Williams driver in 5th place. You'll see some drivers do better in the dry but struggle in the wet, and vice versa. And this is a good opportunity for Paris then to potentially look at a podium here, because Danny and Zach still need to make a pit stop. You lose a lot of time in the pit lane as well, so I think Paris and Rafa will be very aware of that. There's Rafa there just exploring the track limits all over the circuit there, kicking out the back end through the exit of turn 2. Down to the right, left, double right sequence as well, finishing off sector 1. Paris certainly looks the more cleaner, calmer, composed of the two drivers. And Rafa will be very aware that Paris is now within a second. No DRS, that's been disabled due to the wet weather. So if Paris is going to have to, twitchy back end there, the oversteer, very tricky corner in the wet. There is that flat out left-hander in these conditions. In the dry, it's easy. It's an easy flat left-hander, no need to lift off, but in the wet, a little bit of caution is needed. Into the chicane and halfway down this Mistral straight. Rafa again just trying to position the car as best as he can, running over the curb, no harm in that. And Paris will continue the chase. There's a bit of a field gap spread now with the rest of the midfield. Tim finds himself fairly on his own, 7 seconds behind Paris, 3 ahead of Lyon. You've got Ollie as well, half a second back. There's Lakitu inside the top 10. Chapelele, after his spin a few laps ago with contact from the racing point of Lyon, now finds himself in P11. Harry then in 12th, White Fountain in 13th, but he'll probably be at the back of the field in the next few laps. He still needs to make his second pit stop. Westy in 14th, was running comfortably inside the top 10, and we've got Hamilton in 15th, LR Cohen a long way back in 16th place as well. Lap 18 of 27, Danny still slowly pulling away from Zach, but they are only a couple of tenths a lap. But the big mover at the moment has to be Louis. He's now brought that gap down to under 3 seconds. He's probably catching around about 7 or 8 tenths per lap. And he's continuing to pull away from Toxic Tomato. The gap is now up to over 10 seconds, but he's safe in P4, which is a net P2. Rafa and Paris still fighting for 5th and 6th position. We'll wait to see when Danny and Zach make their pit stops, but the net leader really is Louis. Toxic, Rafa and Paris all fighting over the final podium spots. So it's a slightly difficult period of the race. Pretty much everyone pitted on the same lap. A couple of them went a lap earlier, but everyone's now on the same tyres. And with this rain coming down harder and harder, there might even be a change onto the hard tyres at some point. That will really throw a spanner in the works if these guys have to pit for another set of intermediates, or even go onto their full wet tyres, not the hard tyres, the full wet tyres. Because if that's the case, then Danny and Zach will be back in a favourable position at the front of the field. But I do think these guys will certainly soldier on these intermediate tyres. And Paris then is caught Rafa. He's been within a second now for the last few laps, but can't seem to find a way past. You can see him constantly changing some of the settings on his wheel, his fuel mixes and his ERS mode as well. He might as well bring up the telemetry event just to see what these guys are running ERS wise. 0 at the moment for Paris, and he's changing up to 5 on the exit of the corners, down to 4, down to 3, constantly changing all the time. But he's got a healthy amount there, around about the 60% mark. Rafa, meanwhile, he's got all of the ERS. He's got all of the ERS that's available, 100%. So he's clearly saving round here. He'll probably bump it up to 4 and 5 down the long straights to try and prevent Paris from catching and passing into the braking zone for the chicane. Indeed, up into number 4. Paris is doing the same as well. Have a look at front as well. Toxic then, he's saving at the moment. Louis got a healthy amount. Zach and Danny will need a bit of ERS management. But Louis then, he's now got that Ferrari firmly in his sights. He's been consistently catching well over a second a lap now. Louis is probably arguably the quickest driver we have in the Pinnacle tier. Of course, he was last season's Prestige champion after 17 rounds. We've got a car off in Sector 1. I believe it might have been Cohen. It is just recovering to the track, so he's made a bit of a boo-boo somewhere. And the Toro Rosso driver, in fact the Toro Rosso team, with his teammate in 14th, still yet to make his second pit stop, are having a race to forget. Same for the Haas team as well, really, down in 12th and 15th. So yes, last season we had 4 tiers. The Prestige tier was the highest tier, the Pinnacle tier was the second highest tier, but we've got away with the Prestige tier. We've trimmed down the numbers from 80 just to 60. And it's worked out very well. We pretty much nearly have a full grid every race. Probably 1 or 2 drivers missing. We had 1 driver missing from the podium tier, 1 driver missing here tonight. So far, so good from these guys. 3 retirements. Midnight, Leroy and Josh have all had mistakes and incidents throughout the race. They've been running at the back. They've all pulled into the pits at various times to retire. But hopefully they'll be back next week at China for round 3. Chapelele down in 11th place, picks up a 3-second time penalty. As now Louis is now right with the Ferrari of Zach. There's no point even looking at the time difference between them. You can see it yourself on the circuit. Now he's caught him, he's got to think of a way to pass him, and he might be doing it now down into the long right hander. I don't even think Zach put up too much of a fight, although there's a bit of contact between them. Oh, there's bigger contact between them, and Louis is being forced well off the circuit there. This is big, this is huge. Is he going to be able to recover in front of Toxic Tomato? Because Louis is our net leader, he'd see him off the circuit. There is Louis just recovering to the track. He'll have overheated his tyres as well. He has managed to keep in front of the McLaren driver, but that is going to be a big wake-up call for Louis, because now he really has to push. He's over 23 seconds away from Danny, who has to pit for another set of probably intermediate tyres. We've got yellow flags at the front of at the back of the field. Who's that for? Oh, that'll be for Cohen, who has just retired from the race. So he pulled into the pits and retired. So it's now down to just 15 runners. So Danny and Zach then still need to make their second pit stop. But Louis then, he's just had contact with Zach in that long right-hander, to be honest with you. It looked all of Zach's fault. Louis was up the inside. The move was done. The move was clear. He should have been let go. And for whatever reason, Zach's made contact with the back of the Williams driver and forced him well off the circuit. Unfortunately, the gap between Louis and Toxic was so great that he's managed to rejoin. But Louis will have the bit between the teeth now, because he's got a McLaren less than 2 seconds behind him. And he knows he has to push now, because there's an opportunity here that Danny can pit and still rejoin ahead of this McLaren driver. Lap 21 of 27. We're into the final 5 or 6 laps of this race, but this race is far from over. Oli Flavel and Chapelele fighting hard over 10th and 11th. Rafa has managed to pull away a little bit from Paris. Paris was right up behind him for the last few laps, so that gap is now over a second. So I think Paris is just sitting back now for the next couple of laps, reset his charge and push towards the end. Tim then finds himself comfortably in P7. Same for Lion in 8th, Lakitu in 9th. Ollie rounds out the top 10, having just passed, I believe, Chapelele. Further back, Harry in 12th, Westy in 13th, White Fountain in 14th, still yet to make his second pit stop. Hamilton at the back in 15th. These guys will be hoping for a bit of a miracle if they want to pick up some points here. As for fastest lap, well, we'll have a look at the fastest lap now. If I can, how can I do that? I do this, don't I? No, I'll keep it on the tyres. It's this one here, yeah. So the fastest lap so far, which won't change because we're now obviously in the wet period of the race. So MNT Lion will pick up an extra World Championship point for setting the fastest lap. Of course, that will not change. If he stays inside the top 10, that's fine. He gains an extra World Championship point. But one hub rules, if you finish outside the top 10, you can also claim a point for fastest lap. Essentially what I like to call bracket number 2. So the classified drivers from 11th down, which would be 11th to 15th, out of those 5 drivers at the moment, if whoever picks up the fastest lap between those 5 also gets a World Championship point. So it's detrimental of these drivers to really carry on, even if they are 5 laps down and P20 with a few laps to go. Pit in if it's dry conditions, go for a set of soft tyres, try to claim the fastest lap, because there is still something to fight for, and you can still pick up a championship point. Danny really pushing in that Mercedes. He's just been off the circuit there a little bit, so he will lose a bit of time to Zach. Meanwhile, Louis is starting to catch back up to the Ferrari driver. He was 10 seconds behind. It's now less than 9. So with each passing lap, the opportunity for Louis to reclaim that lead once Danny pits is greater and greater, but certainly that incident with Zach a few laps ago really hurt his progress. I think Louis has now managed to find his rhythm again, because he's pulling away from Toxic Tomato whilst catching Zach at the same time, but all question marks remain on when Danny does pit for the second time. We'll have to just wait to see what happens. Is it going to be now? It's not. Oh, we're getting a bit of a lag here with Danny. Hopefully that calms down. We'll stay with Zach. We'll see if he's going to be pitting at the end of this lap. They've got to choose it right. They've got to choose their moment right. The only way that these guys can remain in P1 and P2 is everyone has to pit for the full wet tyres, because if it stays intermediate running, Danny and Zach have to legally pit again. They have to complete the mandatory 2 stops. Both of them have only done it once. So Louis is still in a good position here to take the lead, but he needs to consistently keep catching Danny and Zach ahead. The gap between Danny and Louis is about 21 seconds, so it's going to be very, very close once Danny does pit. So Louis will have to keep pushing. Toxic then finds himself on his own. He's now 3 seconds behind one Williams, 7 seconds ahead of the other, and Paris as well, still about 1.3 seconds behind Rafa. So the lap times between the guys currently running 4th, 5th and 6th seems to have stabilised a little bit. Tim is falling back a little bit in 7th, but he's pretty much safe in that position unless he has an incident and goes off the circuit. Lion though, he's put in a fairly good performance, carving his way up through the midfield. Yes, he had a bit of an incident with Chapellet several laps ago, but other than that, he's put some good moves on, finds himself comfortably in the points in 8th place, and has the fastest lap as well. Nikito in 9th, and Ollie rounds out the top 10. So lap 23 of 27. Phil Smith coming in. Do they get disqualified if they don't? I assume you mean if they don't make their second pit stop. Yes, it's a full disqualification at the end of the race. I mean, you won't be disqualified in the game as such, because it expects you to make a change at some point anyway, but we will then disqualify you from the final classification afterwards. You can pit for your second pit stop, as we're seeing Danny now coming into the pits. You can pit for your second pit stop going into the beginning of your final lap, but you have to be wary. If you're a lap down, then you have to pit at the end of what will be your final lap, not the race leader's final lap, because obviously you're a lap behind. So you can do that. That's fine. You have to complete one racing lap, so you can pit going into the final lap. But Danny is choosing the opportunity now. Zach will take, I believe, the lead of this race, but all eyes are going to be on Louis. We'll jump on board with the Williams drivers. This is the moment of the race. Can Danny rejoin in the lead, or will Louis take it? Louis has taken it by just a couple of seconds. Danny then now into what will be P2. So Toxic Tomato will see that Mercedes ahead of him and know he's got to push now to try and get past. But the race is on now, because Danny is now on a fresh set of intermediate tyres. Louis, you can see there, he's now circulating on his 10th lap, and the gap is only 2 seconds. In fact, it's coming down with each passing corner. So this race is not over. That incident between Zach and Louis cost the Williams driver the best part of 10 seconds, and if it wasn't for that, then Louis would be well into the distance at this point, looking good for his first race win of the season. But as it stands, Danny might be looking at another race win here. He's catching already Louis 1.3 seconds behind, and so this race is now on. 4 laps to go, including the one that these guys are currently circulating. Zach will be pitting hopefully sooner rather than later, and then it will be a straight battle for P1 between Louis and Danny. Toxic will be safe, I feel, in P3, and then it'll be Rafa and Paris in P4, P5. Paris, meanwhile, has now dropped to 2.3 seconds behind Rafa, so I think that little battle for that P5 is now pretty much set in favour of the Williams driver. So good points today to be had for both Williams and Mercedes. Other teams like Renault, Toro Rosso and Haas will be struggling to pick up a single point here. So Zach then, he wants to lead a lap here, at least at France. He's going to carry on then into lap 25, but the big talking point now, as we're still getting a bit of laggy, desyncy, connection-y issues here with Danny's Mercedes, as he now starts to put the charge on Louis ahead, 1.3 seconds behind. Louis has 3 laps, 3 little laps to hold on to a potential race win here. Zach, as I keep saying, needs to pit again. You can just see the Ferrari just up ahead there. He is starting to lose quite a bit of time to these two, which is to be expected. He has completed 10 laps on his intermediate tyres, and Louis is probably, I'd say, arguably the quickest driver in this tier in one hub. And Cohen just coming on stream there saying everything what could go wrong went wrong. Don't worry my friend, there's still 8 races left to go. You're a quick driver. I'm sure we'll be seeing you fighting in the points next week at China. So Harry then down in 12th place picks up, I believe, another 3-second penalty. So his chances of points pretty much all gone at this point. We'll move away from this battle for what will be the lead just quickly. We'll just have a quick scan through before the end of this race. Lion, Makitu and Ollie in 8th, 9th and 10th. Pretty much set in stone. Penalties might change it, of course. They're still relatively close together. Chapelletti still trying to put a bit of pressure on Ollie for that final championship point. He's less than a second behind. Westy as well, trying to move up the order down in 13th. He's about a second behind Harry, but White Fountain back in 14th still needs to make his second pit stop. Hamilton in 15th, a quiet, poor race from the Haas driver. We've lost Cohen, Josh, Leroy and Midnight at various stages of this race. Zach then goes into lap 26. So, Zach, please do remember, you won't be able to hear me, but you have to pit, my friend, at the end of this lap. If you don't, you'll probably cross the line in P1, but you will be disqualified by the tier coordinators for not making your second pit stop. We will just double check. Yes, you can see there, both White Fountain and Zach need to stop at the end of this lap or they will be disqualified. But either way, Zach's not winning this race. Whether he pits or doesn't, that is going to go to either Louis or Danny. 2 laps to go now, and Danny is now within striking range. 0.5 of a second. Doesn't matter about the gap. You can see it for yourself ahead. And Danny's intermediate tyres are 9 laps fresher. He's pushing for all of his might with the ERS, but he's quite low on the numbers. Louis has quite a bit though, so this is going to be very good news to Louis as he dances and weaves his way down the straight, trying to break the toe from the Mercedes of Danny behind, trying everything he can to hold on to what will be a P1. Danny there just bouncing across the curbs, might have picked up a warning for that, but didn't pick up a penalty. I don't think either of these drivers have time penalties. If they have, I've missed it, so it could still change at the end. You can see that Danny is now hemorrhaging that ERS. He's barely got any left. He's got to save as much as he can for final lap assault on Louis Williams. But Louis is looking very healthy with the ERS. It's going to help so much down those main straights. We come back to Zach then. He's got to pit. You have to pit, my friend, or you will be disqualified. Don't throw it all away. You've got an opportunity here for a good haul of points. Does Zach come into the pits? He does. He remembers the rule. He relinquishes the lead. Comes in for his second mandatory stop coming into the final lap. That will release Louis and Danny then as they come into and out of the final corner to start the final lap. Lap 27 of 27. Place your best bets now. It's not going to be easy for Danny to do this. There's probably one real opportunity. That's into the chicane down the Mistral straight, but you can see that he's low on ERS. We know that Louis is really strong in it as well, so he'll just bump that up into the high numbers, as you can see, and try to disappear as much as he can. He's extending the gap as well. Zach then still dropping positions as you'd expect, making his second and final pit stop. Hopefully White Fountain does the same as well, or he'll be disqualified at the end of this race, but he's down in 14th. It won't change anything too much. So here we go then, on to the back straight. This really is the one and only opportunity that Danny's going to get. You can see there that Louis then's bumping up through the ERS. He's got plenty in reserve. Danny not so much. He's trying to gain as much as he can. You can see the interval time on the left. He's not close enough to do it unless he goes for the maddest of dive bombs, but it'll be a silly thing to do, and all Louis got to do now is just keep it clean and consistent. Paris picks up a 3-second time penalty. He's just about 3 seconds ahead of Zach, who's rejoined in 6th place, so there could be a position change at the end there. We've got yellow flags as well in sector 1. It's all kicking off towards the back of the field. White Fountain has made his second pit stop, so he will not be disqualified at the end of this race, but will finish last. And here we go into the final few corners now, into sector 3. Toxic Tomato 5 seconds back. He won't be a factor. It's all between Louis and Danny. Just a couple of corners left to go now. Danny's trying everything he can, but he's low on ERS. He can't find a way to catch or get past Louis. He's got to, this is probably the only last opportunity he's got. He's got to absolutely throw it up the inside. He's got to send it as he can. He can't. He's not close enough. Valor's the better part of discretion. Louis then will come up to the line. I don't think these two have penalties. Louis crosses the line in P1, keeps P1 as well, and that is the first win of the season for our defending champion. Danny, oh so close, less than half a second to taking the race win. Toxic Tomato, a great drive from the McLaren driver with P3. Rafa crosses the line in P4. Paris in P5. Does he keep it though? The answer is no. Zach does take that P5 by 1/10 of a second, pushing the Mercedes driver down into 6th. 10 then Good race, quiet race, but good race from the Alfa Romeo driver in 7th place. Lion crosses the line for the Racing Point in 8th, and Keep Fit as well ahead of Lakitu. And Chapelele has managed to get past Ollie for that final point. Does he keep it? He doesn't. Chapelele had a 3-second time penalty, or at least 3 seconds more than Ollie. So Ollie back inside the top 10. Westy crosses the line in P12, and then it'll be Harry in 13th. Quiet race, poor race from Harry. Teammate as well in 14th. Be one for the Haas team to forget, and then we'll wait White Fountain to cross the line in a lowly 15th place. For retirements, Cohen, Josh, Leroy and Midnight. But congratulations to Louis. He has taken the race win after contact with Zach. Lost him 10 seconds towards the end of this race and really threw that race into doubt, but he put up with an immense pressure from Danny in the last few laps to take home his first win of the season. Congratulations to our podium drivers. Louis will be very happy to get his championship charge, his defending championship charge, off to a very good start here at round 2. Danny, though, he's still right in the mix. Probably people's favourites, or certainly one of the favourites to challenge Louis this season. Battled hard, fought hard, pushed hard at the end for P2, and Toxic Tomato, a very, very strong drive from the McLaren driver, with the final podium spot in P3. Final classifications. The top 3 didn't have any penalties. Rafa then in 4th place did have a 3-second penalty, but it doesn't change anything. Zach then pitted coming into the final lap for his 2nd mandatory pit stop, and has managed to get past Parrell for P5 by dint of Paris having a 3-second penalty. That drops the 2nd Mercedes driver down into 6th. Tim, Lion, Lakitu and Ollie Flavel complete the top 10. Outside of it then, Chapelele with a 3-second time penalty drops him to 11th. Westy in 12th. The two Haas drivers of Harry and Hamilton 44 in 13th and 14th. White Fountain, a difficult race and one for him to forget in 15th. His teammate Cohen retired with a few laps to go. We also lost Josh in the Renault, Taze Leroy in the Racing Point, and Midnight early on in the Red Bull. 19 drivers started. 15 have managed to get to the end in a very entertaining and highly thought out race. Very, very close there at the end. Just half a second separated the top 2. So that leaves me then with just one last thing to do, and that is to come up with my driver of the day nominations. As I'm a solo commentator, it's my job to come up with 2 nominations. If it was a co-com, then both of them would come up with their own personal choices. So it's my choice to choose the 2 drivers I think have put in what I think is the best performance. Maybe a surprising performance, maybe a good performance, maybe one from where they started low down, finished quite high up the order. These nominations will be put out onto Twitter polls by OneHub in the next couple of days. And it's up to you, wonderful guys and girls at home, to vote for who you think out of those 2 drivers were the best 2. So then let's go through the order then. So the top 3, we had Louis, we had S2V Danny, and we had Toxic Tomato. I'm going to give it to Toxic Tomato. Yes, he qualified in 2nd and he lost a position down into P3. So most people will be like, well, why are you giving it to someone who's actually gone backwards in the race? But I would never have expected tonight to see Toxic Tomato qualify in 2nd and finish in 3rd. I thought this would be a race dominated by the likes of the Williams and the Mercedes drivers, others drivers like Midnight, Lakitu up there as well. So it's a good thing to see. I commentated on Toxic Tomato last season. He certainly wasn't a driver that was qualifying in 2nd and finishing in 3rd. So maybe France is a good track for him, or maybe he's just got better at the game in the last couple of months. So one of my votes definitely does go to Toxic Tomato. And Louis always used to say to me that he always used to get disappointed when I never put him up for driver of the day, but I think today my second vote should go to Louis, mainly because he recovered well after the contact with the Ferrari of Zach. To lose 10 seconds, to come under a lot of pressure there from Danny at the end. He defended well and pushed hard in the last couple of laps, bearing in mind that Danny was on a vastly superior tyre at the time. Nearly 10 laps difference between those 2 drivers on the intermediate tyres. So a lot of pressure there in difficult conditions at the end to hold off and pick up the race win. So my 2 votes then that will be released by OneHub Racing is for Toxic Tomato, who finished 3rd place for McLaren, and Louis, who won the race for the Williams team. Nothing else then for me to say. Just say thank you very much to everyone that has jumped in. There's been lots of comments in here tonight. I'll probably go back after the stream and watch them all. Certainly a lot to talk about anyway. Very, very good race. Lovely to finally get back doing commentary. I have missed it. It's been a few months, to be honest with you. Should have been here for the first race. I was working. Should have been here for qualifying night. I was unwell. But it's nice to finally get my season at least off and running. 2 races, 2 entertaining races so far. Still very difficult to call who's going to be a favourite for the title, but there's certainly some very good contenders out there. Next week then, 8:30 for the Pinnacle tier, round 3 of 10. It will be at the Shanghai International Circuit in China. Whether there'll be spectators there or not remains to be seen. But thank you very much for each and every single one of you for joining in at some point tonight for the commentary and for the stream. Congratulations to all the drivers that did get to the end, and I'll see you guys next week.